You're the founder and chairman of ExoWorks and OpenExO, which both help companies implement lessons from your book, Exponential Organizations, by emulating the world's fastest growing companies. So I'm curious if you could give us a brief description of what an exponential organization is and maybe a little backstory of how you even made these discoveries.
Sure. So, I was building out Singularity University, and we noticed that we have a massive forcing function in technology coming. I call it 20 Gutenberg moments, because in the 15th century, the printing press fundamentally changed the world, right? And we
Mm.
call that a Gutenberg moment because it totally transformed society. Well, blockchain totally transformed society. Solar energy completely transformed. Autonomous cars, drones, CRISPR. We have about 20 of those hitting us at the same time. And I think this breaks every institution and mechanism by which we currently manage the world.
Mm.
Um, and so, if in the face of that, we have to kind of build completely new organizations. And we noticed that starting in about 2007, 2008, with the advent of Amazon Web Services, you could take computing off the balance sheet and make it a variable cost. And we noticed a completely new breed of organization growing, like the Ubers and Airbnbs, where they were scaling the organization as fast as you can scale technology. Right?
Mm.
In the past, you could scale technology, but the organization was painfully incremental and linear to build, and sublinear as you get bigger. But now we're seeing these new stuff. TED, for example, leveraging community. And so look at TED. It was a 1,000-person conference once a year. Chris Anderson takes it over and does three things: establishes an MTP, ideas worth spreading. Then he puts all the TED Talks on YouTube, leveraging rich media. Then he allows anybody in the TED community to create a TEDx event. And in 10 years, he has a global media brand, which he's done at a cost of zero. Okay, so
Mm.
you can take an established environment, blow it open to a global level at almost no cost. That is a magical thing to be able to do. So the ability to scale an organization super fast is one characteristic. The economic thesis behind an EXO is that the internet has allowed us to drop the cost of demand and acquisition of customers radically. Online marketing, referral marketing, every Silicon Valley startup is trying to go for a viral loop, right? What EXOs have figured out is how do you drop the cost of supply exponentially? Think about Airbnb. The cost of adding a room to their inventory is near zero. If you're Hyatt, you have to build a hotel. Same with Uber, same with Waze, etc. So we're having now a new breed of companies where they've learned to drop the marginal cost of supply very dramatically, which is the denominator in the value equation, which means your market cap explodes. So that's why the market cap is so high. So what we did was we looked at the fastest growing 200 companies, and said, how are they doing it? What
Mm.
techniques are they using? And that's essentially the inductive reasoning that emerged in the EXO model with the MTP, five externalities, five internal mechanisms, and that comprises the model.
Yeah, that's an incredible line of thought. And it's interesting to note how this is really just a consequence, as well as riding on the wave of exponential technologies
Right.
and taking advantage of them. Yeah, I think it'd be really helpful if you could super quickly, like in a few seconds, for each of the 11 attributes, just describe them. We've talked about
Sure.
the MTP. There's five external and five internal.
Sure. So the MTP is the most important, and we found that every EXO had one. So that's one. Then you have five externalities, and those are staff on demand, like Uber not hiring its own staff, TED leveraging community and crowd, XPRIZE leverages the crowd, right?
Mm.
Um, uh, Google leverages algorithms. Facebook leverages algorithms heavily also. Airbnb is leveraging other people's assets. Okay, and then there's digital engagement models, gamification, incentive prizes to keep really close to the customer. So those form to the acronym SCALE: staff on demand, community crowd, algorithms, leveraged assets, engagement. And those are the externalities you use one or more of to scale very quickly. It allows you to keep a very small feature footprint. Um, think about Airbnb. The fundamental process is to match driver and passenger. And because of the way they do it, they don't do it inside the organization. It happens out in the wild. And by enabling that with technology, they can scale infinitely, right?
Yep.
So those are the externalities. Then we found there were five internal mechanisms. One was the interface between the company and the outside world. Apple with its App Store developers, Facebook with its self provisioning of
Mm.
products and services. Then there's real time dashboards. We find that these companies are instrumented in real time because if you're doing well or doing badly, you better know super fast. You don't want to wait too long, like WeWork and find out that your unit metrics aren't working. Meanwhile, you're scaling super fast, right?
Hmm.
So real time dashboards. The third is experimentation, which is the whole lean startup thinking. Running nonstop small experiments, testing hypotheses, and then with a feedback loop. And taking risk, really important to encourage the taking of risk inside the organization.
Yep.
The fourth is autonomy, decentralized org structures. Letting, one of the reasons Facebook was so successful is Mark let the developers take code right to the live site
Hmm.
in the early days. And that was incredibly inspiring. Every developer wanted to go work there. And they rolled out features 10 times faster than Yahoo or MySpace in the early days and beat the world. Right. And so that kind of a giving autonomy to the people and making decisions as close to the edge as possible is very powerful. And that way also scale. And the final one is social technologies like Zoom, Slack, Yammer, Chatter that allows you we have good evidence that peer-to-peer collaboration in a company is much more valuable than traditional top-down communication. So those are 5 internal mechanisms that map to the acronym ideas. So you have MTP, scale for the externalities, ideas for the internal attributes.
Yeah, it's such a
If you're
valuable
if you're a
framework.
startup, you should be doing all of them. Okay. And if you're a big company, we found that if you fully implement 4, you get a 10x improvement in your organization.
Interesting. Yeah, and so that was going to be my next question. How do you use this? I mean, I it's interesting that you note that a startup should be doing all of these. Like, but is that always possible? Like, what if there's limited resources? How do you determine which to prioritize? Or maybe you do all of them, but you do some, you focus on some more than others. How should people think about that?
Yeah, so I'll give you the way we've laid it out, and it actually is held up remarkably well. Number one step when doing a startup is pick your MTP. Is
Right.
it curing cancer? Is it ways solve traffic globally? Is it Facebook connect the world socially? Whatever
But
it is.
by the
But
way, given that that one is so important, how would you recommend people? What process can people go through to come up with their MTP?
this is like a soul searching thing on I'll give you 3 ways of thinking about it. If you had to wake up at 6 a.m. every morning to work on a problem, which problem would it be?
Hmm,
Which problem gives you that excitement to wake up that early? If you could spend $1 billion to solve one problem globally, which one would it be?
hmm.
Right. And so if you had unlimited free time, what would you work on? Where do you think you can add the most contribution? Elon has 3: go to space, solve energy, solve transportation.
Hmm.
But that's Elon. He's a bit crazy. Okay, so I'll stick with one. Most people stick with one, etc. So you pick your MTP number one. Number two, you either create a community around that MTP, say it's curing cancer, or you join communities that are trying to solve that problem, and you get connected into a community or you create a community around it. Number three, you put together a founding team with a few key roles: engineering, business thinking, a product, etc. And number four is your breakthrough idea. And the breakthrough idea has to be at least 10x better than the status quo. If it's 10% better than the market will ignore you. If it's 10 times better, the market cannot ignore you. Right. And so it should be that much better. And then you start following lean startup thinking, minimum viable product, iterating. And then once you've got the MVP set up, and then you start applying the rest of the EXO attributes, dashboards, engagement, gamification, etc. So that's the way we talk about it when guiding startups to be operating on this mode. We actually have a platform called EXO Builder that allows anybody to show up, put in their MTP, plug in their lean startup thinkings, tick off when they have. It's like an ERP for building a startup, and it's crowd building essentially. So
Wow.
we were just acquired that and launching it. They've already trained 50,000 entrepreneurs on how to think about building new ideas.
Is that something that people could use today?
Yeah, if you go to, it'll be live at Exo Builder at some point, but right now it's the we haven't merged it in yet, but it's canoe, canou.io, canoe.io.